radio, radio. Oh, Richard, radio, Richard.
I'm unbelievably happy to be here with Melissa Manchester, whose voice I have loved for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And now I actually get to ask her about it, which is really fun because I have a lot of vocal questions I want to ask. So first of all, I know that you're a marvelously super trained musician, but did you actually study voice when you were studying piano and harpsichord?
I studied voice for a while, starting when I was about 15. I had a couple of vocal teachers. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So you knew some of the techniques to avoid bad stuff happening to you.
You know, all of that studying was before performing. I mean, I was a jingle singer at the time,
yes.
So that's one kind of performing.
Yes.
But not much of it applied once I was playing in smoky rooms.
Right. No.
And then I got the opportunity, after a particularly dire situation in a very smoky room where actually nothing was coming out of my voice, where one of my background singers, I had to drop the curtain, I had to leave the stage, I had to be flown to a speech pathologist to make sure that my throat was okay.
Wow.
And yeah, it was very scary in those days. And one of my background singers said, I can help you if you will let me. So her name's Wendy McKenzie, and she became my vocal coach for many years.
For all the Radio Richard listeners who are singers and want to know what to do and what not to do, what kind of things did you go through at that time?
In the early days of performing, which was jingle singing, where you really learn how to think on your feet, because you're dealing with clients that really don't know how to convey ideas directly and concisely. That was more like the extension of singing in my parents' living room, which is what I did as a kid. But once I was playing in clubs, once I was playing in very smoky casinos, and I started to get into trouble because I didn't have any technique, not really, and I started to study with Wendy McKenzie. She taught me about preparation before you go on stage. You know, I learned about drinking 2 liters of water during the course of the day. I learned about getting on a treadmill for 30 minutes and really warming up the parts you can't see in your body, including those little vocal cords, because you don't want to be warming up on stage. No. I find that that's terrifying. And also really understanding about placement and not over singing and letting the sound guys help you, and really insisting to the best of your ability what you need to hear in the monitor, so you're not singing really hard in order to just hear yourself.
That's so important. Yes.
And also in the last several years, and this is what I teach, it's called the Art of Conversational Singing. I've been singing my songs for a very long time, but I have found a way to sing them as if it's the first time, every time. And that's very important, because I find nothing more troubling than to hear a successful artist say out loud, I'm so bored by these songs, but you paid for them, so I'm going.
Hate that.
I mean, honestly,
I
really? You're not grateful for the gift? How does that work?
Yeah, I agree.
So, the Art of Conversational Singing is about using the song to be your side of a conversation.
Right.
So you need so that the song becomes a living monologue or a living scene. You know, you're imagining what happened right before you start to sing the song, who you're singing the song to, if the curtains are blowing, what time of it. So you give yourself a deep sense of a scenario to fit yourself in and to create a world for the song to exist in. And then if you do it enough, it sort of becomes second nature. But that's a lot of what I teach.
Yes, and it's exactly the same approach that actors take as well.
It's exactly the same. That's exactly right.
So
but they're actually on stage with somebody else. I'm not.
Well, I mean, you're on stage sometimes with other musicians too, and other singers. So you still have
Rarely.
But I mean, you still have to interact with your environment, whatever it may be. It might be just you and a piano player. Okay, let's talk about, you were in the Harlettes.
I created the Harlettes.
Oh, you created the Harlettes. Okay, so singing with three in a three-girl group
Mm-hmm.
or in a duet. They're all different things. So what are your thoughts? What advice can you give to singers about the different vocal group combinations that they might find themselves in?
Well, the Harlots was unique because it was an extension of Bette Midler's persona as the
Sure.
Divine Miss M. So she really wanted our bodies to pose and have all that kind of attitude. Nonetheless, blending is blending, and that's what I learned in the studios as a jingle singer.
Yes.
You know, unless they ask you to step out and sing as a solo, you have to find your place within the group. You know, if you're singing the harmony, you don't want to overshadow whoever's singing the melody.
Indeed.
That doesn't make sense. And so, you know, blending just becomes a function of intentional listening
Right.
to everybody around you.
Were you usually top, bottom, or middle?
Oh, I'm alto, so I was usually melody, although in my mother's home, I always sang the odd harmony because my
Right.
ear just went to that.
Right. Because the middle harmony, I find, just because I'm not a great singer, is the hardest one. It's pretty easy to figure out the lower or the higher, but
Yeah, I was doing a part of an Ella Fitzgerald tribute and I was singing 3 parts with the 2 women from Manhattan Transfer, Cheryl Benteen and
Great.
the great Janice Siegel, and we were singing old Hoagie Carmichael arrangements, and they were so close where you almost couldn't hear what you were singing. But you know, that's the thing, when you're intentionally listening, you have a sense of purpose. You're not just, you know, blathering away.
yes,
You're
indeed.
trying to contribute to the overall piece.
Just as a matter of interest, what is your, let's say you knew you were going to be on stage in an hour and a half. What little vocal warm-up exercises could you show our people about? These are some good ones to do before you go on stage.
Well, it's interesting because what I've learned is when I start to vocalize, it's very subtle, and you always keep your teeth slightly apart because there's always a chance you'll start to grit and tighten, and if you tighten this, you start to tighten that.
Right.
It's just not good. So if you can be mindful of keeping your teeth slightly apart, you know, and keep your tongue flattened, so that you're really aware of the placement of all the muscles, because again, you're supporting something that's so tiny that you have to make sure that you are breathing deeply, you know, that you're staying relaxed. You know, in the early days, even to soften your knees as you're singing, so that while you're singing and going for notes, it's a full body engagement.
Right.
So you're not just reaching for
Yes,
that,
yes,
because
yes.
that's how you blow your throat out, and your
Indeed.
vocal cords really quickly. But if you keep awareness from the groundedness beneath your feet to the
Yes.
softness of your knees, to the movement of your hips, to the depth of your breathing, to the ability to have that, what is it called, intercostal breathing, where the soft rib is fully engaged. And it supports this. Everything has to support
Right,
this,
right.
including the thoughts in your head.
Right.
It becomes much clearer how to sing when you are thinking about something.
Yes.
When you are thinking about something that relates to the song.
Right.
You know, if I'm thinking about the meatloaf I left in the oven, did I turn the oven off? I wonder if I have my keys. That doesn't help your singing.
Dead in the water.
You know, but if you think about whom you are singing to, and if you see in your mind the time of day it is, and
Yes.
if the sun is shining, or if there's a storm and you're trying to get somebody's attention,
Right.
that all affects how you are singing, and it makes the process of singing so endlessly interesting because it's always different.
Yes. One of the things that I have always adored about Barry Manilow's voice, and when I got a chance to interview him, I asked him about this thing that he sings ballads, but he's got what he calls a two-fisted tone. You know, it's a powerful, strong tone. He's not singing it in some wimpish way. It's very clear and very solid. And your voice, when you sing the ballads, you've got that too. And it's the female version of it. But Now I may be wrong, but that's kind of a gift that you're given. You have that tone and you can produce that noise. But it seems to me, and one of the things we talked about was, you have to maintain that, and you have to be able to be yourself on purpose. So do you think about that in terms of your tone, or over the years has your awareness of making that particular Melissa Manchester sound, which is so powerful?
In answer to the central part of your question, I believe, is that Barry and I are very old friends, and the two of us really understand that we stand on the shoulders of very great singers.
Yes.
And so we bring that forward. He understands about Sinatra, he understands about Tony Bennett, he understands about Nat Cole, as do I. I understand, and he understands about Judy Garland, as do I,
Right.
and Ella.
Right.
And all of those people, and Rosie Clooney and Edie Gourmet, and all of those men and women whose journey started with having a singular sound. They were just gifted with it. But the record companies that had them made sure that that sound was catered to by songs that would service those magnificent voices. And because Barry and I sort of, we matured in the singer-songwriter phase of the record industry, we could write songs that would service our voice because we were writing for our voice.
Yes.
Or we would choose songs or have songs chosen for us that would sort of drape on our voice and around our voice and service the best qualities
Right.
of our voice.
Which segues beautifully into my next question, which is about songwriting. I'm very fascinated by songwriting. I always have been. I wrote a book about it.
Oh.
And it's right here, folks. Okay, thank you. Do you have a methodology for songwriting? And if so, what is it?
Well, I keep journals of ideas, and if I start to hear music with a lyrical idea, I'll get it down right away, or I'll write it down right away. I've learned that it's much more efficient to write with a collaborator just because you get it done. But there are certain ideas that I just have to write by myself. Because they're of such a specific vision. Even if I had a song that I wrote called When Paris Was a Woman, and it was about Gertrude Stein and all of the expatriates. And it had taken me so long to write it because there are certain songs that I write that are so cinematic that to find the words to describing what my inner camera is seeing is so painful because I just can't synthesize it lyrically. So I'll get a verse. So when I wrote the first verse of When Paris Was a Woman, I actually reached out to my friend, the brilliant Paul Williams, and I said, would you help me finish it? And he listened to it and he said, finish this damn song. It's your song. You have the vision. And so I struggled, but I finally wrestled it to the ground. But that's, methodology it's all over the place, I write choral pieces because that's what I hear.
Nice.
And I hear the word singing, and so that's what I listen for,
Let me ask you, you touched on co-writing. Now, you've done a lot of great co-writing, but what I find and what I teach my students is that co-writing with Sam is not the same as co-writing with Jane.
Yes.
Because everybody brings something different to the table. I'd like you to give us a little bit of an insider look of writing, for instance, with Paul Williams or with Carole Bayer Sager or with Kenny Loggins. In what way did you accommodate, or because you're a great musician and a great singer and a great lyricist, so how did you choose which parts to do of these songs?
Yeah, when I first was invited to write with Carole, because she saw me in a concert, she hired me to sing a demo, and then she asked me if I wrote.
Nice.
And at that point, I was just writing by myself. I'd never written with a collaborator.
Right.
So I went up to her house, and we started talking, because it's very hard for me to just sit and write with somebody. I can, and I've done it many times, but it's more interesting for me to hear how you think, what kind of metaphors you use, how many times you say just?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so what I learned many decades later was that I was the first artist that Carole was actually writing for and with.
Mm-hmm.
So she was draping songs for me.
Nice.
I was just making conversation, and out of the conversation came these songs.
Right.
And realizing that her talent as a lyricist was very specific because she had this uncanny ability to start the first line of a lyric as if it's in the middle of a conversation.
Nice.
That's really odd and really rare and
Yeah.
really sublime.
Love that.
When I wrote with Bernie Taupin, I was never in the room with him. We would talk about stuff. I wouldn't see him, and he would send me literature.
Mm-hmm.
His lyrics were so magnificent. I
Right.
thought,
Right.
well, I mean, I hear the music, but this
Yeah.
is so fantastic. I should
Yeah.
just put a frame around it and hang it up.
Right.
When I wrote with Kenny Loggins, we had been meeting in the green rooms of many award shows
Mm-hmm.
as presenters,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just kind of silly that we'd never gotten together. So he came over to my home one night with his boombox and a bottle of wine and his guitar, and we wrote Whenever I Call You Friend, and he went off and
Right.
had a big hit with it.
Yeah. Well, that's really helpful. Just to hear. A lot of people just think you just do the same thing every time. And
Although I must say, however, I was an adjunct professor at USC at the Thornton School for several years, and I do master classes. And what I do implore kids to really dig deep about is to find how it is they think. Because as a teacher, that's all I'm trying to help them do is to think. And because that's there's so much space in a young person's mind,
Mhm.
as much as they think they've lived by age 21,
Yes.
that when you ask them to support that title that they think is the title of the song
Mhm.
with the inconsistencies of the lyrics,
Indeed.
and that it has to sound like one voice,
Mm.
they don't know what that means until you point it out to them.
Right. Right.
And so because they know what their song means, I said, well, that's not where the conversation ends.
What would you say is one of your favorite songs that you've written, but why? I'm mostly interested in why it's so satisfying to you.
Well, I love Midnight Blue because it was my first hit,
Right.
and it's a song of great tenderness and some weariness,
Mm-hmm.
and that is a thread that seems to be woven through several songs of Carole's and mine.
Mhm.
This slight world weariness, which we knew about at very young ages, and it was surprising
Mm-hmm.
that we had that in us. But we were a little weary at that point. we were young married women trying to negotiate relationships in a
Yes.
world where part of the backdrop was the women's movement, which was
Yes,
burgeoning, and
absolutely.
trying to find where we were and
Mhm.
working for men,
Mhm.
who really weren't hearing us, and we could not figure out how to find our voices to clearly convey our simple desires. And I worked like a dog to support that. I did radio tours and secondary radio tours and college tours, and
Mhm.
although I had heard myself on the radio as a jingle singer plenty,
Right.
to hear one's own composition for the
Yes.
first time is
It
very
is
sweet.
a great thing.
Very
Yeah.
sweet.
Well, it's a fantastic thing to have you here with us today, and I can't thank you enough.
You're very welcome.
Melissa Manchester, this has been great, and we're happy to have you, and we hope you'll come back again.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. Radio, a unique collection of my interviews with fellow creators, revealing not only how they do that voodoo that they do so well, but why. So please, like, share, subscribe, and donate so I can keep this channel going and give you this great content. Radio Richard. Be informed. Be amazed. Be inspired.